It was a cold February morning in 1978, and a 46-year-old man was sitting in a tiny, cramped apartment in Burbank, California, with exactly $842 to his name. Now, before you think that's just a bad weekend for some folks, let me put that in perspective. The average rent in LA back then was around $300. A decent used car was about $1,000. So this guy, a husband and father of 2 young daughters, had less than 3 months of survival money left. His bank had just rejected him for a loan. His previous employer had fired him not once, but twice, and every single person in Hollywood, agents, studio heads, even his own brother, had told him he was a washed-up has-been who should just pack it up and sell real estate in Florida. But on that February morning, staring at an empty notepad and a half bag of Folgers coffee, this broke, desperate, middle-aged father made a decision that would eventually turn his name into a $23 billion a year empire. The craziest part? The character that saved him didn't exist yet. The studio that owns your childhood didn't want him, and the one man who believed in him, he'd been dead for over a decade. Stick around, because this is the story of how a man who couldn't pay his electric bill created the most valuable entertainment company on planet Earth, and how Disney makes billions every year because of one insane bet. Now, you probably think you know this story. You've seen the theme parks, you've watched the movies, you've got a Disney Plus subscription that you swear you're going to cancel but never do. But here's what most people, even hardcore Disney adults, don't understand. The Disney Walt Company today generates over $88 billion in annual revenue. That's more than the GDP of entire countries like Iceland or Jamaica. But in 1978, that same company was a dying animal. Walt Disney had been dead for over a decade. The animation studio hadn't produced a hit in years. Their last few movies, The Aristocats, Robin Hood, The Rescuers, they did okay, but they weren't cultural events. They weren't making the kind of money they needed to survive. And the board of directors, they were a bunch of old-school Hollywood guys who wanted to sell the whole thing to a Gulf oil company. No joke. Gulf Oil was this massive petroleum corporation, and they offered to buy Disney for just under $300 million. And the board seriously considered it. They thought animation was dead. They thought family entertainment was a relic of the 50s. They thought the only future for Disney was to become a brand on frozen food boxes and maybe a cheap Saturday morning cartoon. Then this broke 46-year-old father walked into their conference room. His name was not Walt. His name was Ron Miller, Walt's son-in-law, the guy married to Walt's daughter, Diane. And for 17 years, Ron had been treated like a glorified intern. He'd worked every grunt job at the studio, loading film reels, sweeping floors, running the mailroom. Walt had never fully trusted him. The old guard executives considered him a dumb jock because he'd played football at USC. And when Ron pitched ideas, they literally laughed at him. But Ron had something the board didn't. He had a stubborn, almost stupid belief that stories still mattered. And he had an ace up his sleeve that would change everything. But before we get to that, I need you to understand the stakes. Because this isn't just a nostalgia trip. This is a lesson in how to take nothing, literally the smell of an oily rag, and turn it into an empire. In 1978, Ron Miller sat down with a pencil and a yellow legal pad. He started sketching out a division that the company didn't even have a name for yet. He called it non-theatrical production, fancy term for TV movies and specials. Because here's the thing about the 1970s, cable TV was exploding. Every American family, from a cramped apartment in the Bronx to a 3-bedroom ranch in Wichita, Kansas, was suddenly watching more television than ever before. But Disney's leadership was terrified of television. They thought putting Disney content on the small screen would cheapen the brand. They wanted to protect the magic by keeping it rare. Ron saw the opposite. Ron saw that every night, American families were sitting down to dinner in front of their RCA or Zenith sets, and they were hungry for something they could trust. The news was depressing, the sitcoms were cynical, and the movies on network TV were edited to pieces. Ron realized that Disney had a superpower that nobody else wanted: wholesomeness. Not boring wholesomeness, but the kind of storytelling where the good guy doesn't have to be ironic, where a dad can watch with his kids and not feel embarrassed. That was the gap. That was the stake in the ground. So Ron took his yellow legal pad to the board and said, "Give me $12 million. And the board said, "Absolutely not. We're selling to Gulf Oil. Get out of our conference room." But Ron didn't leave. He reminded them of something. Walt Disney had a clause in his will, a weird, obscure clause that said any sale of the company had to be approved by Walt's surviving family members, and Walt's daughter, Diane, Ron's wife, would never approve a sale to an oil company, ever. So the board was stuck. They couldn't sell, they couldn't grow, they couldn't sit still because the bills were piling up. So finally, they said, "Fine, Miller, you get your $12 million, but if you lose a single dollar, you're fired, and we're selling the animation library to a cereal company." That's the moment. That's the pivot. Ron Miller, broke in spirit but not in nerve, took $12 million of a dying company's last cash, and he made a gamble that would eventually lead to Disney making billions every single year.
Now, what did Ron do with that $12 million? He did something so simple, so ridiculously obvious in hindsight that it's almost painful to think about. He hired a team of former NASA engineers and a bunch of unemployed actors, and he built a show called Disney's Wonderful World. But not the old version. Ron's version was different. He went to a tiny production house in Van Nuys and asked them to invent a process that would let Disney create a seamless blend of live action and animation. He wanted a show where a real human could walk through a cartoon door and sit next to a cartoon mouse. And the engineers said, "That's impossible without $1 million of custom computers." Ron said, "You have 6 months and $400,000. And here's where the American grit comes in. Those engineers worked 18-hour days. They scavenged parts from old military radar systems. They wrote code on punch cards in a garage that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. And 6 months later, they walked into Ron's office with a 45-second test clip. In that clip, a man in a tweed jacket walked up to a drawing board, and a cartoon character, a little rabbit with a squeaky voice, hopped off the page and started talking to him. It was clunky. The shadows were off, the rabbit's mouth moved like a puppet, but Ron cried. He literally cried, because he realized that he just created the first modern example of what we now call augmented reality. That little rabbit? That was the prototype for Roger Rabbit, and that test clip became the basis for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which would release 10 years later and gross over $300 million worldwide. But in 1978, all Ron had was a fuzzy 30-second VHS tape. He took that tape to a hotel in Las Vegas, he rented a small conference room, and he invited every single TV station manager from every major market in America, from WABC in New York to KABC in Los Angeles to WLAS in Chicago. He showed them the clip. Then he said, "I'm offering you a 90-minute primetime special. It's going to be half cartoon, half live action. It's going to have a big-name host, and I want you to pay me $400,000 per station." Those station managers laughed at him. $400,000? That was more than they paid for the Super Bowl pregame show. But then Ron played them the audio of focus groups, and this is the part that gets me every time. He'd spent his last $5,000 on a focus group in Burbank, 30 moms and their kids, and he showed them that 30-second test clip. Before the clip, the moms were annoyed. They had grocery shopping to do, their kids were antsy. But after the clip, one mom raised her hand and said, "Can I buy that for my living room?" Another said, "My son hasn't stopped smiling. He didn't smile all week because his dad lost his job." Ron recorded those voices. He played them for the station managers, and within 3 hours, he'd sold the special to every single major market. He made $8 million in one afternoon. That was the first domino. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because most YouTubers will tell you that Disney's success came from movies like The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast, and those movies were huge. They made billions. But that's not the real answer to how does Disney make billions every year. The real answer is a man named Frank Wells and a strategy Ron Miller started but never got to finish. See, after that Las Vegas success, Ron finally had the board's respect. He was promoted to president of the studio in 1980, and he immediately started doing something radical. He said, "Stop making movies for children, start making movies for the American family, and charge them multiple times for the same story." Think about that. In 1980, the model was simple. Make a movie, put it in theaters, then 6 months later, we're going to sell it as a VHS cassette for $79.95. Then 18 months later, we're going to put it on network TV. Then 3 years later, we're going to re-release it in theaters with 2 new minutes of animation. Then we're going to sell the soundtrack on vinyl and cassette. Then we're going to license the characters to a fast food chain for Happy Meal toys. Then we're going to build a ride at the park. And then 20 years later, we're going to sell the whole thing again on a new format called DVD. The board thought he was insane, but Ron had a secret weapon. His wife, Diane, had kept every single notebook, every sketch, every letter Walt had ever written. And in those notebooks, Ron found something chilling. In 1957, Walt Disney drew a diagram on a napkin at the Tam O'Shanter restaurant in Glendale. That diagram showed a circle. In the center, he wrote movies. Then around it, he drew arrows pointing to TV, music, books, comics, merchandise, and theme parks. Walt had envisioned this ecosystem 65 years ago, but he never had the technology or the capital to pull it off. Ron read that napkin, he framed it, and he built the entire modern Disney business model from that one scribbled diagram. That napkin is why Disney makes billions today, because every time an American family buys a ticket to Avatar, they also buy the t-shirt, the action figure, the video game, the soundtrack on Spotify, and the trip to Disney's Animal Kingdom. One story, multiple payments for decades. That's the flywheel. Now, let's jump to 1984. Ron Miller has been president for 4 years. He stabilized the company. He's launched the Touchstone Pictures label so Disney could make adult movies without tarnishing the brand. Movies like Splash and Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Those movies made hundreds of millions. But corporate raiders are circling. A man named Saul Steinberg launches a hostile takeover bid. He wants to break up Disney, sell the real estate, and auction the film library to the highest bidder. And Ron, who fought so hard to save the company, realizes he's exhausted. He's been called the son-in-law who ruined Disney by critics. His health is failing, and the board, those same old guys who wanted to sell to Gulf Oil, they start whispering that Ron should step aside. So in September of 1984, Ron Miller resigns. He walks out of the Burbank studio with a cardboard box. He doesn't even get a gold watch. But before he leaves, he does one last thing. He calls a young, aggressive studio head named Michael Eisner, and he says, "Take the job, but promise me you'll never sell the animation library, and promise me you'll finish what Walt started." Eisner promised, and then Eisner did something Ron never could. He took Ron's model, the multiple revenue stream, family-first, cross-platform ecosystem, and he supercharged it with 80s Wall Street aggression. Eisner greenlit The Little Mermaid for $15 million. He bet everything on a Broadway-style musical cartoon when everyone said musicals were dead. That movie made $200 million worldwide. Then he did it again with Beauty and the Beast, the first animated film ever nominated for a Best Picture Oscar. Then Aladdin, then The Lion King, which made almost $1 billion in 1994 money. That's nearly $2 billion today. And every single one of those movies followed Ron Miller's playbook. Theater, VHS, soundtrack, toys, TV, theme park, re-release. Over and over. That's the engine.
But here's the twist that most people don't see coming. The reason Disney makes billions every year isn't just because of the movies or the parks or the streaming service. It's because of a decision Ron Miller made in 1981 that had nothing to do with entertainment. He created the Disney Channel, a cable network that aired nothing but Disney content 24 hours a day. Now, back then, cable was a wasteland. MTV had just launched and they were playing music videos. HBO was showing uncut movies. But Disney Channel was different. It was the first network that American parents could turn on at 6 a.m. and walk away from safely. Their kids could watch for 12 hours without seeing a single beer commercial or a single swear word. That trust, that insane, almost religious trust from American families, that's the real asset. That's why when Disney Plus launched in 2019, 10 million people signed up on the first day. Not because of the content library, although that helped, but because of the brand promise. The brand promise that Ron Miller rebuilt from scratch when the company was worth less than a single Marvel movie today. Let me put this in numbers for you, because numbers are honest. In 1984, the day Ron Miller left, the Walt Disney Company was worth about $2 billion.
Today, it's worth over $200 billion. That's 100 times growth in 40 years. And of that $200 billion, roughly 60% comes from the pillars Ron created. The film studio that follows his distribution model, the consumer products division that licenses characters to every big box store in America from Walmart to Target, the theme parks that use his loyalty marketing strategies, and the streaming service that is essentially the Disney Channel on steroids. The other 40% comes from acquisitions: Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, 20th Century Fox. But here's the key: those acquisitions only work because of the Ron Miller playbook. When Disney bought Marvel for $4 billion in 2009, every Wall Street analyst said they overpaid. Now, the Marvel movies alone have grossed over $30 billion. And how did Disney monetize that? The same way Ron monetized Roger Rabbit: theaters, streaming, toys, video games, theme park rides at Avengers Campus in California and Paris. It's the same napkin diagram from 1957. So here's the lesson for anyone watching this who's trying to build something: a YouTube channel, a business, a creative career. Ron Miller did not have talent. He was not a great animator. He wasn't a brilliant writer or a charismatic CEO. He was an average guy with a football injury and a stubborn belief that stories matter. He was broke at 46. He was laughed at by his own family. And he spent 17 years doing the dirty, invisible work that nobody applauds. But he had one thing that beats talent every single time. He had a system. A repeatable, boring, unsexy system for taking one piece of intellectual property and wringing every dollar of value out of it without destroying the magic. And that system, that napkin diagram, is the reason Disney makes billions every year while other studios go bankrupt. Because other studios make movies, Disney makes memories. And then they sell you those memories again and again in 100 different ways for the rest of your life. Before we wrap up, I want you to picture something. It's 1978 again. Ron Miller is sitting in that cramped Burbank apartment. His wife Diane is making spaghetti on a hot plate because the oven is broken. His daughters are doing homework at the kitchen table. And Ron opens his wallet. There's a single $20 bill. He takes it out, folds it into a small square, and puts it in the pocket of his jacket. He tells Diane, "That's my last $20. I'm not spending it until I know the company is safe." He kept that $20 bill for 6 years. Through the Las Vegas pitch, through the hostile takeover, through the boardroom fights and the late nights, and the critics calling him a failure. And on the day he resigned, he took that $20 bill out of his jacket, unfolded it, and bought a cup of coffee for an intern who'd just been hired. He handed the intern the bill and said, "Never forget, a big company is just a small idea that somebody refused to quit." That intern's name was Kevin Mayer. He later became the chairman of Disney's direct-to-consumer division and launched Disney Plus. And he still has that $20 bill framed in his home office. That's the real magic, not the castles or the princesses or the billion-dollar box office. The magic is a broke, stubborn, middle-aged father who refused to let a good story die. And because of him, every time you hear that 4-note intro to When You Wish Upon a Star, you're not just hearing a jingle. You're hearing the sound of a man who had $842 and an unwinnable fight, and he won anyway. Thanks for watching Brand Story Lab. If you want more stories about the hidden decisions that built the biggest brands on earth, hit that subscribe button. And next time you're at Disney World, standing in line for a 90-minute ride, remember that some guy in the 70s designed that line to make you hungry for a $30 turkey leg. That's not magic. That's Ron Miller. I'll see you in the next video.